There was a question about the definition of noise-sensitive activities and whether that accommodated the guest accommodation and the port noise, and I think Councillor Turner, that was another matter you had raised. And the comment there is it has been included in the port noise area. We'll bring that to you when we talk to the specific chapters if that arises, but in this stage there's no need for any further change. I think the next one is just a comment about the number of definitions, and we're process of going through and revising unnecessary definitions, and there's one there as an example being cinema. It's not required. The other comment I think Your Worship made was the need for a glossary, and that glossary chapter has been deleted completely.
Oh, right.
Also on this table, as Brigitte said, there have been some consultation comments coming through since we last spoke to you. And one of those here is someone seeking a definition of transport system.
Would that be useful? Would that be useful?
Basically, we're saying here we just need to use consistent terminology and recommending no change. So we're saying it should be a transport system.
Through you, Leanne, can I just ask you, Alan, just going back to about the glossary part. So it's going to be deleted from this chapter, but will the glossary be contained separately for the whole plan? Like, it's not like you're not suggesting that we not have a glossary.
We're suggesting that the glossary is not in the plan. Some parts of the chapters will refer to various pieces of legislation or a strategy document or whatever, and it's purely a reference, and that document is able to be found elsewhere, so we don't need to actually include the glossary.
Well, and I'm assuming, and tell me please that I am correct, or can you confirm, that in fact it'd still be easily accessible to find those definitions if someone wants to find the definitions.
Yeah, they're not definitions, they're statements of, say, an act or a strategic document that the council has prepared. So when this goes into an e-plan format, you'll be able to actually hyperlink from, if someone said refer to the Transport Act or something or another, then you'll be able to go straight from the district plan to that piece of legislation. So we actually don't physically need the glossary per se. And if it's, again, there's a reference in the chapter to a council strategy, then that will just hyperlink you straight from that to the strategy.
Well, I guess having new technology, we'll all be able to do it, but
yes.
I guess I like seeing the definitions loud and clear, so as long as I can find them, and it sounds like we will on the electronic version.
Councillor, just to clarify your question, there have been two documents that have been referred to. One is a list of definitions and the second one is a glossary. And these are two very different things. So the list of definitions is a crucial part of the plan and will remain in it. But what we're talking about as being the glossary was a list of other statutory documents or other pieces of legislation that were referred to elsewhere in the plan. And that list doesn't need to be in the district plan.
Thanks for explaining. I've got it now.
Okay, thank you.
The next one down there is the definition of utility that's come from KiwiRail, and our comment there is that's a matter that's more appropriately dealt to when we do the utilities chapter in phase 2. So that definition will come forward when that chapter comes later on. Also, KiwiRail seeks to be identified as a network utility operator, and again our comment is that we'll come to you with the utilities chapter later on if needs be. That was the end of definitions, unless there's any questions.
Sorry, can I just ask a question on KiwiRail? The utilities chapter is not part of the stage 1, priority 1 chapter?
No,
That's correct.
So the concern really is that with special purpose railway land, it's very easy for people to get consents to pretty much do anything, or like the Carlisle Street, the Cass Street, the depot. So, like, I'm a little bit concerned we're leaving that to later, because what we know post-earthquake is many people see that as prime land to do whatever with very little controls. Have you got any thoughts about what we might be able to do in the interim?
We cannot add any further information into these first 8 chapters. They've already been out for their consultation. It's taken us 8 months to get this far. That has always been a chapter that's been in the second group of chapters to be considered.
Doing commercial and industrial, I would have thought there's a case that actually it shouldn't be special purpose. It should have a overlying zoning which prevents certain activities from happening on that site without getting, a fully notified consent, or without getting some sort of other permission.
Sorry, just explain this to me, because I'm new in the job. So
Yeah.
just
So
you're talking about preserving rail corridors for.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of what we call special purpose zone along the railway corridor.
Yeah.
And effectively what that means is that KiwiRail can lease out the land to anyone, and they can do anything on it. And it's incredibly hard for the community to have any input into the types of activities that happen. So when you get things like a bus depot, gas, hazardous materials, when you get things like the waste dump that over in Cass Street, I think it was, with asbestos and all sorts, there's very little controls. And so what people see it as is it's a really easy way to get contentious activities put into areas that have very little oversight from a planning point of view as a council.
So that's a pre-existing designation in the plan that we're not addressing until later on.
Yeah, that's what we've just heard. But I guess the concern I would have is there a way in which, because one of the issues with industrial and commercial, and many of these areas I think probably are, aside from the residential, which has pretty much got houses on it.
So are there no restrictions on what rail can do alongside the railway line, even in a residential area?
I think perhaps in a residential, I'm not sure, but this is the concern that's been raised with me in the commercial and the industrial areas, that we need to have better buffers between the activities. We need to have much more clarity over what's permitted and what's not.
The cycle lanes look good alongside the railway line. Yeah. The issues that you've raised, we're certainly aware of and we are working on. They are nowhere near completed to be able to come forward into the phase of going to the ministers. If you wish, we could bring them forward and have a separate process for them, that's sometime before the next tranche of chapters. But they can't be included into this round. The work isn't completed. No, but is there anything that we could put into the industrial chapter, for example, in those areas where they merge? Well, we could look at that. We can look at that. I would have to say, though, we haven't had the discussions, we haven't completed the work with KiwiRail on these matters yet. No.
But things like minimum setbacks, adequate buffers, because it goes back to the other
Was that raised during the initial consultation that you did? No. It wasn't also, well, I don't recall it being raised during the briefings earlier this year. Otherwise, no, I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about, because you say we've been doing this for 8 months. That's longer than we've been around. So we've been working on these first 8 chapters for the last 8 months. So was it always the 8 chapters? You never had a broader brief than that? No. Hey? There's always been priority chapters, and initially they were prioritised because of the land use recovery plan and the discussions that we were having with government at that time. I'm not criticising, I'm just inquiring, and because what I worry about is that inadvertently we may have actually left ourselves exposed to incompatible use, and then also potentially some lost opportunities as we try to recover the city. Well, yes, that's a possibility. However, it's noted that through the truncated process and the discussions that we've had with the ministers, that the hearings panel can make the decisions about when it will hear certain submissions. So if it believes it's best to leave submissions on certain aspects of chapters until the second round comes through, they can make that decision so that there is the ability to ensure that there aren't lost opportunities, what have you.
Yeah, all right.
And the reason it was in two tranches is because of the need to get on and have 2 lots of notification to be sure that we can get the first priority matters out there and make them operative.
Yeah.
Priority chapters.
Okay. All right, so anything more on definitions? So we'll move on to the
strategic directions.
Strategic directions.
So if you can find your papers in front of you on strategic directions.
Actually, Leanne or Brigitte, do you mind if I just sort of ask a question as a segue going into this, just because it's a bit of a holistic one? The more I've been thinking about this, just I guess with the whole district plan review, I suppose my fear is effectively what the ministers got at the end of the process, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is it a right of veto, for lack of a better word?
Not at the moment, in the way of the papers that I've seen drafted, no.
So we basically hand it to them once we've done our piece, and is it likely that there's going to be lines sort of struck out and things changed quite dramatically?
That could well be the case. You have been given a copy of the Canterbury Joint Officials Group comments. That could well be what happens. That's why it's going to the ministers for 15 days. They will come back with comments. Then, as I understand it, the process remains still that the committee will then consider, have regard to those comments and make decisions about what amendments it would make to the documents before they go out for notification. And where it declines to make an amendment, I understand there needs to be a paper to go back, written and go back to the ministers to explain why.
So that all sounds good, and thanks for clarifying exactly how that will look there. I guess my fear is, maybe I'm sort of tainted or bitter, or I don't know what the word is, but you know, I was so proud of the share an idea process that we went through, and I saw staff just slogging their guts out, and it made me pretty proud to be a part of this council at that time and incorporate all that. And I think, looking back with the benefit of hindsight, what was just nonsensical is, and every time we've had a good outcome as a council, is when you get all the interested parties around a table and say, well, what are you trying to achieve? Where are you coming from your perspective? And I reckon that probably if we'd done that with the Central City Plan, we could have been in a position that probably didn't leave the people of Christchurch feeling like they'd been slapped in the face, like this council had been slapped in the face, and then drawing a greater wedge between Crown and local government, which is, to be totally fair, exactly what happened in my opinion. With something like the district plan review, which is just so defining for this city, why aren't we, it feels, this is a crude expression, it feels arse about face a bit. Why aren't we sitting down right in the early stages saying, where do you want to come from? Let's not have a Central City recovery plan, share an idea thing all over again. What are you trying to achieve at it? What's important to you? Here's where our staff are coming from, and here's where we think our community's at. Let's sort of try and set a framework now and be on the same page at the start, instead of just coming through and going through what my cynical side of me tells me could be just a kind of slap in the face, divisive process all over again. That's my genuine fear around it.
I understand that. If I could just take you back to the structure of the whole district plan review process, we do have in place a collaborative advisory group, which includes representative from the ministries, various ministries, including our UDS partners, iwi, NZTA, and they have met regularly, almost weekly, I think, for the last perhaps 4 or 5 months.
And we did all of that with the Central City Plan too.
That's correct. And we do have a lot of agreement on most of the points in these chapters. However, as you know from those comments, and this is not different to what happened with the Central City Recovery Plan, there are still issues from the ministries about standards relating to urban design, standards relating to some of the transport rules that we've discussed. And those comments are always going to be there, and it's a matter of weighing up and balancing what you as a council want to put into the document. However, It is no longer the document of the council in the sense that we don't have any further influence over it apart from potentially making submissions to it, because at that stage it goes to an independent hearing panel. And that's really all I can say at this matter. We have tried in a number of ways to be collaborative on this project, including, as I went over with you in the first workshops, a numbers of hours given to the Canterbury officials group, the CJOG group, to bring them into the picture as well. So there are always new people coming into this framework, but the body of the collaborative advisory group has been the same and has been going for the last, 3, 4, 5 months. And they're also involved in the scoping of the next phase of chapters that's coming through too. You want to add to that?
The legal framework is that it's the hearings panel who makes the decision on the submissions on the notified plan. It's not the ministers. The decision is going to be made under the Resource Management Act, and there's no change to that.
To be concerned, there still is no agreed process. There's no exact process that's been agreed yet. So, and the minister ultimately, that's still a negotiation that's ongoing, as I understand it.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, I think it's right for Councillor Goff to raise this because it does concern me the question, the overarching from that both. The last thing that we want to see happen is for that fundamental sort of being resolved, and if it's not resolved, then it will lead to an antagonistic response, one against the other, and it's actually not in the interests of the city that occur. And I actually wonder whether it would be worthwhile at some point to sit down with ministers ourselves, at the time perhaps when they. I know that the time is so incredibly short, but given that there will be a delay at the point that it will be publicly notified, I think to the end of June now, isn't it?
Yes, it's open for submissions for 30 days and then further submissions for another 10 days. So,
sorry?
The after notification, the draft chapters will be open for submission.
Yeah, no. The point that I'm making is that when it goes, that it won't be notified now until June. We thought it was going to be the end of May.
That's correct.
Yeah, so there is a little bit of leeway there now that wasn't there before. And I wonder whether at the point that the ministers report back to us, we ought not to meet with them as a governance group.
Yes, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, it's just because, the last thing that we want to have happen is essentially, we're in two different frames of decision making, and this is something that's become very clear to me with the Housing Accord yesterday, is that, the government makes its decision making, it's a closed cabinet process, it's budget secrets, all of those elements that take the decision making away from the public arena. Here we are in the public arena being live screened, talking about the ultimate plan that we will be responsible for putting out for public notification, and then an official process that will then take over. If at that point we are subject to, attack from central government because we haven't understood what their concerns are, we don't have to agree with them, but I actually think that it might be worthwhile taking Jamie's point to actually meet with them at the point that they report back to us, give you time to report to us on the nature of the advice that's come through to them, and for us to have a discussion about it, but then for us to meet with the ministers, just so that we have that real clarity of view around where they're coming from and where they see our plan. And I just don't think that there would be any harm. It doesn't bind us to agree with their position, but actually nobody would be left then with the view that we were never advised properly on their view, or that we didn't understand what their position was, if we gave them the chance to actually describe it to us personally.
Yes, and Madam Chair, just as you weren't in the room, in the very first slide that I put up. No, that's all right. To your attention, this slide here. There are new dates now that have gone into your diaries, but you see here that we would expect the Minister's comments to come back by the 6th of June. Mm-hmm. So potentially when they give those comments back to us, or the day before, is when, with your assistance, perhaps a meeting could be set up to meet the Ministers before they hand those comments over, if you like.
Well, that won't give you time to reflect on them and to comment on them.
And then we have, well, if we get them on the 6th of June, which is what we consider is an extra couple of days past 15 working days, so if we get them then we have about 3 or 4 days to consider them before we come back to you with our comment on the Minister's comments and propose recommendations for any changes to be made for you to consider then on the 12th and 13th of June.